Right into our guest speaker, Ken Hoff. So Ken is a professional web developer, and he's also worked at Microsoft as a program manager, and now he's got his own business doing consulting and contract work. So what I thought would be interesting is I asked him if he could do the Kiva Loan app that we did, using just the server side, right?
Client side, yeah.
Client side, yeah.
HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
Okay. So, let me reduce the mic here. Okay, you can go ahead.
Here we go. That works. And I already started recording that.
Okay.
All right, cool. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up super early here. I haven't been up this early since I had to get on a flight last time, too. So super props to you for actually doing that. My name's Ken Hoff. I am Dr. Hoff's son, obviously. And today we are going to be talking about web development. Let's jump right in here. A little bit about me. You can find all about me. You can find out a bunch about me and all the projects that I've done at hoff.tech. If you are interested in getting in touch, definitely email me. Ken@hoff.tech is going to be the easiest way to do that there. If you want to follow along in the slides, I would actually totally recommend doing so because I have a bunch of code in here that you can just copy and paste in with the interactive parts of this lecture. Just head to hoff.tech/slides/CSCI498B, which I think is the ID of the class here. Navigation is with the arrow keys. Pretty straightforward there. About me, I graduated from CU Boulder, up in Boulder. I graduated December 2013. I was a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science. I was on sort of the fuzzier side of computer science. I was dealing with human-centered computing. They had like a weird track name for it. But basically it meant, in addition to all of my algorithms and data structure stuff, less focus on like operating systems and stuff, more focus on UI design, UX design, understanding how people actually interact with computers and how to design software so that it is easy to interact with the computers. After I graduated from CU, I worked at Microsoft in Seattle, well technically Redmond because it's just a little bit outside of Seattle, but I worked there for about 2 years. I was a program manager at Microsoft. Everywhere else they'd call it a product manager, sort of like figuring out what is it that we should actually build instead of actually going out and building it. As a program manager, I neither programmed nor managed, but I was working on some big corporate product called Azure Active Directory, which sort of like manages all of your school accounts. So if you guys have like a user account in the CSM system, it's managed by something called Azure or by Active Directory, and I worked on a tiny little part of that called reporting. While I was at Microsoft, and actually after I left Microsoft, I worked off and on my own startup thing. After I graduated CU, I took some time off. I worked on my startup. I went to Microsoft. I continued working on the startup, and then when I actually quit Microsoft, I started to work on my startup full time. Since then, I have sort of gracefully sunsetted the startup, which is the polite way of saying that I killed it. But it was a lot of fun, and I would say that that was the thing that taught me the most about web development. I am self-taught in web development. Probably simply because of this startup that I had. Right now, I am a full-stack web developer based out of Boulder. I do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of web services. People come to me with app ideas. Usually it's business students who have more money than sense. And they say, hey, I need an app or I need some kind of website. And I say, yes, absolutely, I can build that for you. And I go off and build it. And it's a lot of fun. And then also I teach front-end web dev classes in the evening through the co-working space that I have an office at. So that's a lot of fun if you want to find out more about that. Or if you're interested in taking web development classes, definitely say hi. Here's some dumb stuff that I've built so far. The most recent one that I was working on was Run Life Analytics. It's basically just sort of a client-side application that helps you figure out. Takes a little bit for the server to boot up here. But it tells you about various runners and sort of like gives you views into how all of those runners, like what their various 5K times are and what their BMIs are and all sorts of stuff. And so they have like they got 50 different data or 50 different features from about 100 different runners, and you can filter all of this information based on this. So we can see like here's the unfiltered data line. Here's all of the runners that are filtered down. Here's the male runners, that are age 18 to 32 or something like that, and here's their average BMI. And here's their average 5K time. Some pace calculator stuff, like if you plug in a bunch of information about yourself, you can actually get back your estimated 5K and 10K time. If you plug in a bunch of information here, it'll actually give you some suggestions about like, here's what you can do to improve your running. These guys are working on their startup, Run Life Analytics. They came to me and said, hey, we need an MVP. We need a prototype to show this kind of stuff. We can actually build customized training plans based programmatically off of all this data that we have. They wanted to show this application to investors so that they can see all the various ways that they could make money off of it. I'll let you guys click through more of this stuff. Overwatch, StatsBot, if anybody plays Overwatch. Daft Punk Lorem Ipsum is basically just sort of like a Lorem Ipsum generator. If you guys have ever used Lorem Ipsum, it's basically just placeholder text, and you can sort of scroll through it and get a bunch of placeholder text you can put into mock-ups or stuff like that. One that you guys might be interested in, you guys are using Firebase a lot in this class. One of the interesting client project that I did recently was the Glass game. It's a sort of like a marketplace for buying and selling high-end glassware, if you get my drift. And so this actually runs entirely on Firebase. This uses the Firebase real-time database, which you guys are also all familiar with. It also uses Firebase authentication, Firebase storage, Firebase hosting. Hosted on Firebase, users log in through Firebase and upload images, which are then stored on Google servers through Firebase. So if you guys want to take a look through that read-through, it's a lot of fun. I do a little bit of bitching and moaning about Firebase security rules. If you guys ever have to actually write an application, like a production application against Firebase, I would definitely read up on Firebase security rules and figure out what some of the gotchas are there, because I don't think that they do super well on that just yet. But it's a lot of fun. Check that out if you want. Let me close all this other stuff here. All right. Yeah, and then I also wrote a Slack bot that automatically grades the assignments for the students in my web dev class. I just automated out my TA. How to be a web developer. Look stuff up on the internet, make stuff, and repeat. And at some point, somebody will call you a professional. Literally, like, no joke, that's how it works. It takes years to do this kind of stuff. There's so much to learn here. But realistically, if all you do is just these three things over and over again, you will get so much better at it, and you will learn so much, and then people will actually pay you to do web development for them, or iOS development, mobile app development, etc. Here's what we're going to learn today. We're going to learn about HTML, which is putting content on a page, on a web page. We're going to learn about CSS, which is styling all of the content of the page. We're going to change the colors, we're going to change the fonts, we're going to change sort of the padding and layout of all that stuff. And then we're also going to write some JavaScript today. We're going to listen for some user interaction on the page. If somebody's going to click a button, if somebody's going to mouse over something, if somebody's going to press a key. We're going to learn about networking from within a browser web page. We're actually going to send HTTP requests from within the web page. And then we're also going to manipulate the page. We're going to change the actual content styles, add new elements, remove elements from the page using JavaScript. With all three of these things, we are going to build a small app that displays all of the latest loans from kiva.org. It sounds like you guys have already been using it, so you guys are already familiar with that. Given that I have talked about me and how to be a web developer and what we're learning today, what questions are there so far? About me, about web development in general, about my history, about what we're going to learn today, anything like that.
It's early.
What?
It's early.
No, I know. This thing that I do in classes, I wait an obnoxiously long time after I ask what questions are there, because then like I know like after I count to 10 in my head, like when I hit like 9 or something, somebody will have a question for me. It's so early. I have no idea how you guys have been doing this the entire semester. It's absurd. I was up at 5:30 this morning and had to go.
What's like your personal favorite thing you've worked on?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see. I would have to say that Run Life thing that I showed you earlier is like probably the most fun that I've built so far. I've done a bunch of games, like a lot of games, just sort of like in 48-hour game jam sessions, and a lot of those have been fun. I'd say that Small Sacrifices, you guys can check it out later, is probably the best of those, just because of the team that I had and how well the aesthetic was put together there. So I've done a bunch of games there. This actual site, the Hoftex site, is a completely static site, which means that it is literally just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I write a bunch of markdown files, which are like sort of HTML, and it gets converted. Like there's a huge conversion pipeline that happens for Hoftex, and it like builds a bunch of CSS, HTML, JavaScript, etc. And that's been like a ton of fun working on this site. I invest a lot of time into this just because this is what I always tell people to go to, and this is this is the first thing that my clients see, and this is like the impression that they get of how talented I am. So that's usually something I do there. But yeah, I'd say that the Run Life thing is probably the most fun so far. I just finished that up like a week or two ago, so I don't have like a full write up on that just yet. But eventually I will. Great question. Cool. All right, let's get tooling out of the way. What text editor should you use? Presumably you all have text editors. You guys have been using Xcode. You might be using Sublime Text. You might even be using TextEdit or something on the Mac. I don't totally know. I use Atom for everything. Atom is a text editor built by GitHub. It is awesome. I love it. It looks a little bit like this. If you booted it up the first time, it'll look a little bit different for you. Don't worry about reading that right now. I'll blow it up whenever we get there. Atom has a bunch of plugins and style sheets and snippets and language support, and it's very extensible. Lots of people have written plugins for it, and I love using it. Beautify and linting and language-specific support. If you're using Sublime Text, if you're using Visual Studio Code, if you're using Notepad++, even just Notepad or TextEdit, that all works fine. For web dev, I generally don't like using huge IDEs like Xcode or Visual Studio, or if you use like Eclipse or IntelliJ or something like that. The overhead of just like setting up those projects is a little bit too much for me. But if you have something that works for you, definitely just do that. As for browser, for today, I'd recommend that you use Chrome. If you use Firefox or Safari or even Edge, you should be all right. Using the developer tools is going to be a little bit different. It'll look a little bit different from what I see on the screen. I would not recommend using old versions of Internet Explorer or even new versions of Internet Explorer just because it does not have some support for various features that I find crucial to web development nowadays. And this is usually what web developers feel like whenever they have to develop for Internet Explorer browsers. If you want to figure out sort of like what browsers support, check out caniuse.com. This gives you a huge list of various things that various browsers support. Notably, Flexbox is like the huge one that I always worry about, and IE does not have great Flexbox support, but everything else does. So just use Chrome and it'll be fine. Cool. All right, right in your first web page, bust out those text editors. We're going to create a new file called index.html. So I have my Atom over here. I'm going to create a new file right here. Actually, I'm going to delete my old index.html. All right, new file. I'm going to save it. I'm going to just do index.html right here. Let's see, index.html. Remember, the file extensions matter here. And then inside of my index.html, I'm going to put the following in here. We're going to have less than h1 greater than hello world, less than slash h1 greater than. So if I do less than h1 greater than hello world, less than slash h1 greater than, just like that, like we see right there. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Come back over to my slides here. What does it tell me to do? Then double-click the file in your Finder or Explorer, and it should open up in your browser. You can also use Command or Control-O to open up the file in your browser. If I pull up my Finder right here, it doesn't actually matter what it doesn't matter if you can read that or not. Just find the actual file in your Finder or whatever. Where is this stuff? I don't want that. Here we go. And then I want to do index.html, and I open that up, and I can see it says, hello world, awesome, yay, great, we've done the basic thing. Cool. If I'm just blowing this up using Command ++++, but this will normally look pretty small on the page, just like that. Oh, no, I don't want to save. Go back. All right, back to the slides here. Next slide. All right, debugging HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We're going to use Chrome's built-in developer tools. Easiest way to do that is if you go to View and then Developer and then look for Developer Tools and click that, and it should pop something open for you. It might look like this. It might be on the bottom of your page. I'll let you figure out how to adjust it there. I'm going to go over to my index.html. I can also open up developer tools by right-clicking anywhere on the page and just going to inspect. And that will pop open my developer tools to the right there. I will blow these up a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. Notice that it actually changes depending on how big the thing is, so it might look a little bit different for you here.
Safari has
I believe it does. I don't know what they look like.
Right-click inspect elements and then just select the resources tab.
Yeah. So yeah, it should look approximately the same here. You should be able to see a bunch of HTML. Hopefully you see something like styles, and then the other major thing that we're going to look at here is the console. First thing that we're going to look at here, if I mouse over here, I can see like different things happening on the page here, but I see a bunch of HTML here. I see HTML, head, body, and then we have that h1 hello world /h1 that we wrote just a little bit ago. Don't worry if it says like equals $0. That's just like some other tools that I have installed right now. That's going to be primarily, you're always going to want to stay in the Elements tab up here. You don't see very many tabs for, there's all my tabs right there, but for the most part, I'm just going to stay in the Elements tab here. The second part of this pane here is the Styles tab. Kind of hard to see on mine just because it's so tiny or whatever. But if I scroll through here, I can see some weird things. I see an H1 user agent style sheet. I see this little nested box thing over here. If I scroll down more, I see some more display, font size, font weight, etc. We'll go over these in just a little bit here, but these are sort of the styles that we apply to our various elements. And the last thing that I have here is this console section. Nothing in here just yet. I see it's got a little caret there. I see it's got a blinking cursor. I can type stuff in it. That'll be our REPL, or read evaluate print loop section where we use JavaScript. If you're not seeing the console, that's okay. Try hitting escape and see if that pops it up or down there. If you're still not getting it, do the little 3 dots up here in the upper right and go down to more tools and then find console. And that should pop it up for you. Technically, you can also access the console from your tabs up at the top here, but that'll make everything else go away. Everybody get all that figured out? Everybody able to open DevTools? Anybody not able to open DevTools?
I'm still working on Safari.
So do you like click and inspect?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's figure it out here.
First thing you have to do is go to Safari preferences, so just command, comma,
Oh, interesting.
and then you'll go to Advanced.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of Advanced, there is Show Develop Menu and Menu Bar.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
You got that? And so then it looks like up here in develop, I do. I don't know how to use Safari. let me plug in my page here, and then I'll right click on it, and I'll just do inspect element, and then it should pop open something here. Yeah.
And then you can click the little like right hand display new menu, the like half shaded square.
Half shaded square. I must be totally dumb
It's a
here.
little itty bitty box. It's like a half shaded square.
This guy?
And then-
I see. And then you can click on styles, and then I'll say it right there.
Let's see.
Did you get all that figured out?
Yep, I got it.
Cool. Anybody else having trouble? Everybody able to get it all right? Sweet. All right, cool. Yeah, I'll continue using Chrome, but for the most part, Safari should show you the same stuff, just maybe in a different layout. Just click around and try and find buttons that look similar to what I'm doing on Chrome, and you should be fine. Neat. Mostly staying in the Elements tab. We talked about HTML on the page. We talked about styles on the page, declarations and computed, and then we talked about opening up a console on the page. All right, cool. HTML elements a little bit more in depth. I see this element right here. Anybody with experience in HTML elements, can anybody tell me what this HTML element is, or what it does, or what it will display on the page? A link. Exactly, yeah. So the A, anybody know what the A stands for?
The anchor tag.
Anchor tag. Turns out that way back when they invented the internet, they had anchor tags, and the reason they called them anchor tags instead of teleporter tags is because they actually linked to various sections in the same page. If I go to Wikipedia, or what was it? What do I look? I usually look for Andre the Giant. This is a good little example of like how anchor tags were intended to work. You'll see in Wikipedia, it's got this content section right here. I'm going to donate later. It's got this content section right here, and I can click on any one of these. If I click on early career, it'll jump down to early career. On the URL up there, it's kind of hard to see, but it'll say hashtag early career right after the URL there. And this is basically an anchor within a page. And so the anchor tags were originally intended just to link between all of these different sections within the page. They weren't originally intended to link outside of the pages. Sort of like a teleporter tag would. So that's why they're actually called anchor tags, just a bit of trivia right there. And we will learn how to actually link in between all of these a little bit later. There's 4 parts to every HTML element. The first one is the opening tag. That is everything within the less than and the greater than sign right there. That includes that href equals https://hof.tech. That https://hof.tech is actually considered an attribute within your HTML tag. Href stands for hyperlink reference, and then it's sort of just like a key value pair right there. Href equals https://hof.tech. That is an HTML element attribute. Then there's the actual contents of the tag, hof.tech right there, and then you have the closing tag, which is the same thing as the opening tag, minus the attributes, just including a slash right before the name of the tag right there. You can try messing around with a whole bunch of different HTML elements. We already saw h1 over here, if I have my index.html. I can also do a paragraph tag just like this. I can say, this is a paragraph tag. Yay! If I save that and I come back over to my index.html and I refresh, I can see this is a paragraph tag right below hello world tag, or the heading tag, sorry. And if I look inside my DevTools, I'm going to get rid of my console, I can see if my mouse over the paragraph tag right there, it just highlights the paragraph tag just like that. There are lots and lots more tags. We saw the anchor tag right there. If I just copy and paste this anchor tag in, excuse me, just go ahead and paste that in right there. Come back here and refresh. I can see there I've got my anchor tag. If I click on that, it'll take me out to hof.tech. I don't actually need to see that. I can add other attributes to this anchor tag. You guys might be familiar with target equals underscore blank. Anybody have any idea what this might do? If I refresh and click on hof.tech, just something a little bit different now. Actually opens up the new page, or it opens up a page in a new tab. I can still go back to my old tab and see all that stuff. So if you want people to like link out to your LinkedIn page, or if you have a separate project page or something, that might be a way that you do that. Target blank right there. What other tags are there? There is UL, OL, and I. Stand for unordered list, ordered list, and list item. So if I do, let's do ordered list, and I do a couple different list items in here. Notice that I actually have to put all of my list items within the contents of my ordered list right there. If I swing back over to my page here and refresh, then I can see it says 1, 2, 3 right like that. This will order everything for me. I don't actually need to put numbers on this. You can mess around with table tags too. They're very complicated, and way back in the 2000s, people used to use tables to lay out everything on the page, but I don't recommend you do that anymore. Fun fact, my dad's site is all laid out via tables right now, so I need to fix that for him. That's okay. We'll work on it. There's image tags. IMG tags, and these work a little bit like our anchor tags. So if I do less than IMG, greater than, and I don't even think I need to have a closing tag necessarily. If I just do an image tag like that, and I go back to my page and I refresh, I'm not going to do anything. Technically, the image tag is still there. If I mouse over it, I can see a little caret right there saying that, yes, it's there, but I need to actually tell it what image to display here. I can display GIFs, I can display SVG, I can display JPEGs, all that fun stuff. So if I have, what do I have right now? Stupid.gif. Yeah, I'm going to do source is equal to, and I have stupid.gif in the same directory as my index.html right now. So what the browser's going to do is it's going to load up the page. It's going to say, oh, hey, I have an image tag, but I don't have the file stupid.gif. It's going to make another request, get stupid.gif, and then actually display it on the page. So if I come back here and I refresh, I can see a huge Adventure Time GIF right there. And I can see in the HTML right here, image source equals stupid.gif. Remember, that's an HTML attribute telling the HTML element what to display. Anybody know what the title tag does? What's the title? That is exactly correct. It is on the tab up at the top here. So if I look, kind of hard to see because I can't like blow up the browser here. But if I look up at the top of my page here, it says index.html on the tab title right there. I can actually use the title tag to change that. The title tag doesn't get displayed anywhere on the page. Less than title hello. Actually, let's do as something like that. Title. I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to come back to my page, and I'm going to refresh. Now notice that the title isn't actually rendered on the page anywhere. We put some text in it, but it's not actually included on the page. I can see, yes, I do actually have the title tag in my page right there, but instead of it showing up on the page, it shows up way at the top of the page right there, in the little tab title right there. It is also possible to manipulate that with JavaScript. So if you're working on like a chat app or something, you need to like flash something in the title, you can like change that programmatically. Sweet. All right, what questions are there so far? It's cold. All right, cool. A couple notes about HTML elements. They can obviously be nested. We saw that with our list items right here. The entirety of the internet is just a series of nested boxes. If I come over to hoff.tech here, and let's pull up the developer tools on this thing, and I look at all the various elements in here. If I have my header section right here, I have an H1 within my header section, which is within my body section. If I go to my main section right here, I have a couple sections within that. Let's see, I have an H1, I have an image, I have a div. A div is short for division, but it's what web developers are commonly using just to sort of like segment and nest out different elements on the page. So if I have a bunch of stuff that needs to be grouped together, I'll usually wrap that within a div. So I have inside of my div, I have a couple paragraph tags here, and so that would be sort of how I wrap all of those together and include those within one thing. And then I can just style the div and make it work a little bit easier. Let's see, where's the, is this my selected projects section? This is a little complicated right here. I have anchor tags, and there is a lot of attributes on this anchor tag right here. There's a class of thumbnail image, there's a target of self, it has href of this, it has data project ID, it has a built-in style right here, and all of that is just this glass game bit right here. It's got an H1 within that, and it's got a paragraph tag within that. So you have an anchor tag, which wraps an H1 tag, which wraps a paragraph tag. All this stuff is being styled to make it look in a specific way here. Same thing goes for all the rest of these. If I look at each one of my posts here, I can see I sort of have a similar thing going. Anchor tab, wrapping an H3, wrapping a span, which is just sort of like a little bit of text that isn't necessarily in line with anything else, and then I have another paragraph tag. The entire internet is just a series of nested boxes. Or everything on the front end of the internet is a series of nested boxes. This is a pretty flat structure for a page. Even though I'm going like 6 levels deep here, like if you go to like TechCrunch or something like that, they will have potentially dozens of levels of nested divs deep, which get pretty complicated pretty quickly. speaking of which, I usually get cranky about page weight, which is the amount of data that the page actually contains, or the amount of data that the computer is required to transfer across the network in order to display your page. If you want to learn more about that, go to Network, and it's going to look a little, I'll zoom out just a little bit here. I'm going to refresh my page completely. I'm going to do Command-Shift-R so that nothing's cached at all, like I make new requests for everything. I can see down here at the bottom that I'm transferring 518 kilobytes, and I think that, what is it? This image takes up 203 of those kilobytes right there. I always get cranky about this because lighter pages mean more users can use your site faster, and I don't have to use up all of my cell phone data plan in order to view your site. If I Google the very first web page, I think it's in here. Yeah, browse the first website. This is the very first site on the internet. Like literally the very first page in the internet. If I pop open my developer tools, I can see that it is built with exactly the same building blocks that we are building with our sites right now. Here's an H1, here's an anchor tag, here's a paragraph tag. They're using some old school tags here, DL and DT and DD, which stand for definition list, definition term, and definition. Actually, it might not be definition. I don't totally know. Anyhow, it's kind of like an old tag. We don't really see these much anymore. But literally, this is all just the same stuff that we are building HTML with today. There is no style on any of this page. This looks exactly like what we were just writing on our HTML. But if I go over to the network tab and I do a complete hard reload, 2.4 kilobytes. Pretty small. If I go to Bloomberg, what is code? I think I include a link to this later in the talk. This article is great. This came out last year sometime, and it basically explains coding to non-technical people. This article is huge, it has tons of content, tons of styling, tons of JavaScript. It is a fantastic article. I see it's got like an actual logic gate simulation in here, so I can like turn on and off all these different things, and you can see how that flows through the system right there. And then it's also got, we have our simulated keyboard right here. So it will actually read all of the different JavaScript input, or listen for all the JavaScript input events. And it's just got like dozens of more of these interactions. It's a fantastic article. I would recommend all of you read it when you get a chance. I'm going to pull up developer tools, and I'm going to pull up network, and I'm going to do a hard refresh here. We're going to see what we get. So we can see this little number going up here, and we can see all of those different requests being made across the network. These are all different resources on the page, various. The actual HTML content is probably the first thing served. Then it looks for various CSS files, various image files, various script files that it needs to go out and download and then execute. After everything is said and done, that does not seem right. But it says 63.3 megabytes for this page. I don't think that's right. I'm sure it's not that much, but I just might not have an ad blocker running or something, and it might be getting a bunch of crap in here. I don't totally know, but 63 megabytes, kind of huge. It's many thousands, many orders of magnitude larger than the pages that we are writing right now. But if I wanted to pull that up on my phone, Dad would get mad at me because I would run through all the cell phone data plan again. All right, we use divs to separate out a bunch of different content. You saw header, section, footer, aside, some other weird tags in there. These are new HTML5 tags. I don't expect you guys to ever have to use these. These are useful for browsers or search engine crawlers to go through and try and identify the relevant content of your site. But realistically, all of those different elements behave just like divs when laying out your page. So start out with divs, and then if you're feeling fancy and stuff, you can start using header, section, footer, aside, etc., all the new HTML5 tags. There is a single root HTML element on all of these pages. Notice that in our page that we just wrote right here, there is literally a single HTML root element right here. And in our HTML file, we didn't actually write that anywhere. The browser is smart enough to figure out that, yes, this should all go in our HTML, and it will add it for us. Browsers are smart enough to do that, thankfully. And also, there are two sort of child tags that HTML tags should have. The first one is the head, the second one is the body. We don't have anything in the head right now, we have a bunch of stuff in the body. Everything inside the body should be actually rendered to the page, which means that there's one tag here that should not go in the body. Which tag is that? Title, exactly. We need to move the title into the head tag because the title isn't actually rendered to the page. Everything in the head tag should not get rendered to the page. So I'm actually going to add my HTML tags in here. I'm going to do just like that. I am going to move this down to the bottom. I am going to add my body tag right here just so I explicitly say, yes, this is all of this stuff should go within the body. I'm going to run my beautifier real quick so it automatically indents everything. And I'm going to add my head tag right here. I'm going to take my title, and I'm going to put my title within my head tag. The page will still display just fine if you don't separate out between head and body tags, but just for sort of for conventions purposes, if somebody else is going to work on your site, I guarantee you they're going to like you better if you put all of your scripts and links to stuff in the head tag instead of just interspersed throughout the body tag wherever. All right, I need to get cranking here. You can include comments like this, less than, exclamation point, minus, 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 greater than. And then we're also going to use a bunch of class and ID attributes when styling our app with CSS and manipulating it with JavaScript. You can have as many elements as you want with the same class on the page. You should only have one element with a given ID on the page. So if I say, you know, here's a paragraph with class of right aligned. We're not actually doing anything with this just yet, but I could have multiple paragraphs on the page that have the same class of right aligned. If I, on my H1, I say ID is equal to, you know, main heading or something like that, then I can select that heading just like that. All right, we're going to start laying out our Kiva app right here. I'm going to add a little bit of content for it. I'm just going to use our index.html right here. I'm going to copy and paste. I'm going to talk through this just so I can keep moving here. First thing we have is our HTML tag. Second thing we have is our body tag. We don't have anything in our head just yet. I have an H1 that says Ken's Kiva.org loan display app right there. And then I have a div where I'm grouping together 3 different anchor tags. I'm just going to say that this div has the class of navigation. We're not doing anything with navigation just yet, but I have 3 anchor tags in it. I have one that points to Kiva.org, I have one that points to the class syllabus, and I have one that points to HofTech. If I click on each one of these, I can see that they open in new tags or in new tabs just because I'm using the underscore blank symbol on all of those. And then underneath that navigation section, I have another div, except this div has the ID of loans, and I'm going to say this is where all of our loans are going to go. All right, so this is just our bare bones loan display app right now. If I then want to start styling with it, I have to use something called CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's a way to apply styles to a bunch of different pages at once. In order for us to do that, we have to use a link element to point to an external style sheet. An external style sheet is just a file that ends in .css. We're going to put this inside of the head tag on the page, which should be inside the HTML before the body tag. This is the tag that we're going to want to put in here. The link tag has 2 attributes, rel equals style sheet and href equals style.css. Rel equals style sheet just tells the browser this is actually a style sheet that we want to apply to the page. Href equals style.css tells the browser where we can go and find style.css. I am going to create a new style.css. I'm going to create a new style. I'm going to save it as style.css. I am going to include this link tag on my HTML page. I'm going to go back to my HTML page. I'm going to add my head element again. And I'm going to paste this link tag in here. No need to actually have any content in this link tag. No need to have a closing tag for this link tag because it doesn't have any content. Inside of my style.css, I'm going to put this code in it. style.css. That's going to be our comment up at the top there. That's how you do CSS comments. Then I'm going to have h1 curly bracket, opening curly bracket, color colon blue semicolon. Semicolons are very important in CSS. Closing curly bracket right here. I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go back to my index.html. I'm going to refresh. Boom. And there we go. Now the h1 is blue. We can do a bunch more stuff with this as well. We can change the background color of the h1. We can change the font family of the h1. We can change the font size of the text alignment. We can change the margin, padding, height and width of the h1. We can do lots and lots of different things with CSS styles. A CSS declaration is what these are called. They're composed of two different parts. The first one is the selector, which actually provides the rules to select all of the elements on our page. In this case, we're saying, hey, we want to select all h1 elements on the page. That means if I were to put another h1 element on the page, h1, just like that, come back to my page, refresh, then that would also be styled with the color blue. It wouldn't just be the first h1 on the page or anything like that. So the first part of the CSS declaration is the selector. It selects all the elements in the page that we want to style. The second part is the declaration block. Everything within the curly brackets here. We can have multiple ones of these on multiple lines if we want. In this case, I'm just saying change all of the elements that we have selected to have the color of blue. Notice that this is the text color blue and not necessarily the background color of blue. We can change background color using a different one. A whole bunch of different selectors that we can use on the page. If we just use the tag name, it's going to select all instances of that on the page. So if I want to select all divs on the page and change the color of those to blue, I just change it to, instead of h1, I just use div, just like that, and refresh. And then this is the only div right here. These links are technically within a div, but they've got their own styling right now. Change that back to h1. If I want to select all elements on the page with a specific class attribute, I can use .className for that. So if I want to select all, let's see, let's do class navigation. Let's do .navigation, and then I'll do background color is blue. We're going to change that a little bit, and we're going to refresh here. And I can see now that all of the elements that have the class of navigation of the page, or navigation on the page, have the background color of blue. Similar to that, I can also do different IDs on the page with hashtag, or pound symbol if you're really old. And loans, I think, is the ID, or the element with the ID of loans on the page right here. If I come back and refresh that, then I can see that I am selecting all of the loans elements on the page. You can select multiple tags, IDs, classes by stringing them together. You can do button.continue or button hashtag submit.continue. That'll select all buttons on the page that have the ID of submit and also have the class of continue. Remember, you should only have one ID or one given ID on a page, but you can have as many classes on a page as you want. You can select nested elements by putting spaces in between selectors, or you can use the greater than selector to select direct descendants. I'll let you guys mess around with that. There's a bunch of different styles that you can apply to all these different things. We looked at color, we looked at background color. Height and width are both available. Padding and margin are sort of how we add white space around all these various elements. And text align is sort of how we would literally set the text alignment of the various elements. So if I look at my H1 here and I say, yeah, let's add some padding of 30 pixels to it. And then let's also, let's do text align center to it, just like that. So I'm going to add 30 pixels of padding around the edge of the H1, and then I'm also going to align it to the center. So if I come back to my page here, refresh, I can see it starts to look a little bit better here. Here's a bunch of reference material. There's a bunch of like good games to learn CSS, so if you want to check out the CSS selectors game, that's really good, and also Flexbox Froggy. Flexbox, I don't think is similar to auto layout. I don't know how auto layout works necessarily, but Flexbox might be similar there. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste all this style in here because I got to get through a bunch more here. So I'm going to copy and paste this style at CSS here. I got a bunch of comments in here, so if you want to read through those and mess around with those, go for it. You guys are welcome to copy and paste those in as well. I'm going to refresh, and so now we can see that our page looks a little bit better here. I should be... Why isn't the font family working? Weird. Oh, I'm copying and pasting in my HTML as well. Whoops, don't do that. Yeah, so there's my style.css. If I refresh here, then I can see I'm actually putting in a new font family here. We're using Arial instead of Times New Roman. If I hover over each one of these, they actually change different colors now. They're all centered. They have a bunch of padding, stuff like that. We're going to put all of our loans in this section now. So in order for us to do that, we need to start using JavaScript. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use the JavaScript console. Going back to my page here, if I have my developer tools open, I'm going to bust open the console and I'm going to do the following command, which is just console.log and then hello world, quotation mark, semicolon, don't forget. And then I'm just going to hit enter. It's going to say hello world and then say undefined. And that's because console.log is not actually returning anything. It's just spitting back a null value or the undefined value. So that is how I actually use the read evaluate print loop inside of JavaScript. Inside the browser, we just have our little console. We can write all of our JavaScript within there if we want, but ideally we want JavaScript to run every single time that we load up the page and sort of like create, listen for different user interactions on the page. And the way that we would do that is we would, oh yeah, high five if you did that, by the way. And so the way we would do that is we would use the script element right here. And so you should be using the source attribute on the script, but it is also possible to just use the script element and to put all of your JavaScript within that script element. I'd recommend creating a new file, which is myscript.js. I have my myscript.js right here. Hasn't got anything in it just yet, but I can do console.log hello world, just like that. Don't forget your semicolon right there. And then I'm going to have you put this tag at the bottom of your body document. And this is different from the head tag. And I know it's different, but this is going to be far easier to use in the future when you start listening for user interaction on the page and trying to manipulate the page if this script tag is at the bottom of your body document or body element. So coming back to index.html, I'm going to go to the bottom of the body element, not inside the head tag, which is where scripts would normally go. I'm going to paste it in right here. I have script with the attribute of source equals myscript.js. Inside of myscript.js, I have console.log hello world. Coming back to my page here, I'm going to refresh. Cool. And then it says hello world, just like that, just like we did in the read evaluate print loop section there. If I click on myscript.js:1, we can see that yes, it is actually being called at line 1 inside of myscript.js right there. That's how you should feel after you get that to logged away console. Cool. Everybody able to get some kind of JavaScript to appear on the page? Sweet. This is how I feel sometimes about JavaScript. These are the O'Reilly JavaScript books, and the one is the O'Reilly book on JavaScript, and on the right is the O'Reilly book on JavaScript, but only the good parts of JavaScript. So that gives you an idea of how JavaScript is. Basically, way back when, in 1999, there was this guy named Brendan Eich, and he worked at a company called Netscape. I actually used Netscape back when I was in school, so that's dating me a little bit there. But it was Netscape Navigator, and they wanted to build a language that made it easier for developers to embed interactivity on web pages. At the time, everybody was like super into Java and stuff, and so they were like, "Oh yeah, we should make like sort of a Java thing, but only runs in that only runs in browsers." And so this guy Brendan and I created the first version of JavaScript in 10 days, and I think they called it Mocha. And then later on, they rebranded it to JavaScript to like try and get some of the marketing buzz off of Java. And so that gives you kind of an idea of like how, if the language has such noble origins as that, you can only imagine it how downhill it's gone since then. Basically, for the first like 8 to 10 years after that, like various browsers tried implementing it in various ways, and there was just wars between Microsoft and everybody else about the right way to do it. And then there was just sort of the dark ages of JavaScript. But recently, it started getting a lot better, and we're starting to see like an explosion of new JavaScript frameworks and libraries. You guys may have heard of React and Angular and all that fun stuff. And so there's some really, really cool stuff happening in JavaScript right now. Check out the 2016 JavaScript stack to get an idea of all the various things that are written in JavaScript. Atom is written in JavaScript. Atom actually runs inside of a browser window. This is basically like a web view or something that you guys are using, but everything in Atom is just like interacting it with the browser here. So I got a bunch of divs and spans and listening for user interactions events. So some cool stuff happening there. You can also write server-side code in JavaScript now with Node.js. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. Yeah. But we need to make sure that we're listening for some user interaction on the page. I think I got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try and cram all this together here. We want to add a button to the page, and when we click that button, we want to load some stuff from the Kiva API. I'm going to add a button on my page, and I'm going to add an ID to that button just so it's easier for me to identify that button later. That button is going to say Load Loans. I'm going to put that sort of in the same section that I have. I'm going to put it underneath the loans section. I'm going to save that. I'll come back to my page. If I refresh, it says Load Loans right there. If I click it, nothing actually happens. Doesn't take me to a new page or anything. Doesn't do anything in JavaScript just yet. What I want to do is I want to run some code every single time that this button is clicked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my script.js and I'm going to add this little bit of code right here. What this code says is document, so we're looking at the document of the page, and we're gonna call the method getElementById on the page. We're gonna pass in load loans button as the ID or as the argument to the getElementById method, and then we are going to access the onClick variable, local variable, whatever you want to call it, on that whatever document.getElementById returns, and then we are going to set that equal to function. Console.log hello world, closing curly brackets right there. This is an anonymous function. If I declared another function, then I could actually also pass in that function later. But in the meantime, I am just going to go ahead and copy and paste that into my script.js. Instead of this console.log hello world, I want to put that guy in right there. So document getElementById load loads button .onClick. So there's basically an onClick attribute that we are setting within that HTML element, and we're saying every time that element is clicked, I want you to run this function. Go ahead and save that. Come back to your page right here. We're going to refresh. Nothing's changed, but when I click on load loans, it says hello world. Nice. Just like that, and it'll stack everything for you, which is nice. I told you before to put this tag at the bottom of your body. And so the reason I want to do that is what happens if I go and I put this in the head here. This is, inside the head is where I'd normally put all my JavaScript just because it's not actually rendered to the page. But if I come back to my page here and I refresh, it gives me an error. And it says, uncaught type error, cannot set property unclick of null. And so what's happening here is that the browser is loading the page, and it's loaded in the head element. It looks for the link. It goes out and grabs style.css. It loads in myscript.js. It tries to execute myscript.js. Myscript.js executes, and document getElementById load loans button executes. And the thing is, the browser doesn't know about the load loans button yet. It hasn't seen it yet. It's not actually in the browser. It's not in the document object model yet. Which means that it doesn't know about it, it's not able to find it, and then when I try and access a local variable on an element that does not exist, JavaScript will actually throw a runtime error. So that's why I tell you to go ahead and put the script at the bottom of the body there, because at that point, when the browser actually evaluates the script, it's seen all of the different HTML inside of the page. All of those elements have been loaded into the document object model. The browser knows about it and can return the appropriate element there. So now that I have fixed that, I click load loans, and I do hello world just like that. Let's see. Code should now look like this. If you want to just copy and paste that in, go for it. Last thing, making web requests with JavaScript. This is different than using the Firebase SDK. Google's really nice, the Firebase guys are really nice, and they have written a bunch of code that makes it really easy to attach listener events, and all that stuff is basically done through WebSocket connections with Firebase. But standard HTTP requests are like sending a GET request to http google.com. And so browsers, underneath all of it, use something called XML HTTP request. And using XML HTTP request kind of sucks. Like, it's just complicated and it's just really hard to use. So other people have written libraries to make it a lot easier. We're going to use a library called jQuery. You may have heard of it. It is a pretty huge and standard library at this point, but it does make making HTTP requests a lot easier. We're going to use something called jQuery.ajax is the specific method that we're going to use here. And we're going to call it the Kiva API in order to do so. Here's the documentation for all the Kiva API. We're just going to use this get loans newest thing right here. And so this little URL right here, if I copy and paste this into a new page, it gives me some stuff. This is JavaScript, or I guess it's a JavaScript object, and we're going to use this to spit out all of our different loans on the page. But in order for us to do that, we first need to include jQuery on our page. The way we're going to do that is we're going to tell the page, hey, go load in and run a JavaScript file from another server. And that server is going to be located at code.jquery.com. We're going to be grabbing the file, jQuery311.js, and we are going to load that into our page. It's going to execute, and it's going to modify some variables in the global scope on the page so that we can actually use it. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. It's okay to go ahead and put this in the head element. This is not dependent on any code that is currently in your page, so definitely put this in the head element. Coming back to my page, I just copy and paste that little bit in there. We see there is a script tag with the source attribute similar to how we actually used it for our own script right there. If I come back to my page and I refresh at this point, nothing actually changes. We're just loading jQuery in. We're not actually telling it to do anything just yet. If we want to actually make an HTTP request, we have to use the $.ajax method. When we run the jQuery script, that $sign variable in the global scope gets written so that, hey, this is what we're going to use to interact with jQuery. And the first thing we're going to do is $.ajax, and then the argument that we pass into the Ajax method is the URL to the API route that we want to call. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste in this $.ajax thing into myscript.js. If I do this, I'm going to save it. I'm going to come back over to my page, refresh. Not actually going to do anything just yet. But it does actually make the request. We're just not doing anything with the response from the request. And because this is asynchronous, because it makes the request and then it has to wait 200 milliseconds or whatever to get the response back from kiva.org, we have to use some asynchronous methods to respond to that. And so we are basically going to call the done and fail methods on the object that is returned by the Ajax method. The space doesn't necessarily matter here. It'll know that it's all calling from the same object here. So copying and pasting this in here, I see done function, this guy right here is an actual argument that we are passing into the done method. It's just a function we're saying, hey, execute this code as soon as you are done here. Done is kind of a misnomer because if it's calling the done method, then the request has succeeded. If it's calling the fail method, then the request has failed for some reason. And as soon as the request is done, as soon as the request has succeeded, then we're just going to go ahead and log out whatever we got back from there. Going to go back to my page here. I'm going to refresh. And I can see, all right, cool, it spit something out here. Keep in mind that this is not happening when I'm clicking the button. This is happening as soon as we are loading up the page. The JavaScript is getting executed, making the HTTP request, and then logging out the data as soon as it gets something back here. If I click on this various object stuff right here, I see loans, array 20. That's probably what we want right there. I have an object, activity, rickshaw, Rubina, transportation, fundraising from probably some part of the world. And here's another food market, Ever LAS food fundraising, etc. So we can see that we are now actually getting back the list of loans from Kiva right there. If I want to make this execute every single time that I click the button, it's pretty straightforward. I just put it inside of the onClick function right there. So I can see that after I click the button, I make the HTTP request, and then I log out whatever I get back from the HTTP request. Come back over to my page, refresh, click the Load Loans button, and then it spits stuff back out. Last part of this is that we need to actually put this on the page. Clicking the button stage. All right, cool. Manipulating the page with JavaScript. The easiest way to do that is to first create a new HTML element, and then you actually have to add the HTML element to the page. So the way we create a new HTML element is by this document.createElement function or method here. And is it okay if I go like a minute over? All right, cool. Document.createElement right here. I'm going to use var. This is just declaring a variable. I'm going to say my element right here. I'm going to log out my element just to see what actually happens whenever I create a new HTML element. Remember, this is going to get executed as soon as I run the page. So if I come back to my page here, refresh, I can see, hey, it spit out a div. It doesn't have anything in it. It's just a div. It doesn't have any content. It's not actually attached to the page anywhere. If I want to set the content of that element, I'm going to say my element, and then my element has a local variable called inner HTML. I'm going to say hello world. Just like that. Don't forget your semicolons. Technically not required, but it's good practice to do in there. My element.innerHTML, and I'm going to log out my element again. I'm going to come back over to my page here. I'm going to refresh, and it says div hello world. And this is kind of weird because it does it this way twice. It logs out, and I think it like updates prior to that or something. How Chrome inspects elements in this kind of thing is sort of like retroactive, I guess. I can talk more about that later if you want. Anyhow, we see we have our div. The inner HTML of that div is hello world. Lastly, I want to actually put that element on the page. And so I'm going to use that this kind of thing that I had before. I'm going to find the loans section on the page using the document.getElementById method, or the getElementById method on the document. So instead of load loans button, I'm just going to find the loans element on the page, and I'm going to do append child method. And then I'm going to pass in the new variable that I created, my element right there. Going to go ahead and save that. Going to come back over to my page, going to refresh, and I can see, cool, now we actually have hello world on the page. Let's see. The next thing that I do is I actually write a for loop, and this for loop I think is pretty syntactically similar to C++ if you used that before. And what I do is I loop through all of the loans inside of the data that I return back, and I do the exact same thing for each one of those. I create a new HTML element. I set the inner HTML of that element to the name of the loan plus the activity of the loan. So for this, I don't remember what it would be exactly. Oh, I need to actually click a button. Right. So for this one, it's going to be Darylyn and then bakery, and it's just going to be appending a bunch of list items to the page. And then, yeah, so I create the element, I set the inner HTML element of the element, and then I actually add the element to the page right there. So in interest of getting the rest of my slides done real quick, I'm basically at the end here. I was going to talk about WebDev Freestyle if we had time, but we clearly don't. I'll talk about questions. I do want to point this out real quick. So I feel sometimes about web development. This is a list of more dumb fun web stuff. I think I have the what is code article on here. I have the first web page on here. Bunch of XKCD interesting web dev stuff that they do. If you like playing video games, there's a whole bunch of like good programming and systems design video games, as well as like teaching you how to learn video games. So I'd recommend checking out some of those. Obligatory pitch for me, if you're a student, definitely come say hi if you want to get coffee or talk about life after college or what interviewing is like. If you have somebody who's working on a charity or a 501c3 or a social cause or something, let me know because I can usually work on those for pretty cheap. And if you have anybody that you know that actually needs an app built, definitely get in touch because I can hire you on as a subcontractor so you can make some money and get some experience and all sorts of good stuff there. Hit me up at ken@hoff.tech is the easiest way to do that. Don't forget, look stuff up, make stuff, repeat. At some point, somebody will call you a professional. That's all I got. Thanks, guys. And I'll be up here for questions, and I have business cards and stuff if you guys want.
gonna be the best, Jeff. What's up? So we should probably talk about the project.
Yeah.
Have you worked on that?
Nothing past what I did before. Should be to a document. Yeah. So we'll figure out exactly our presentation.
I just had one question. You talked
Yeah.
about the data rate kind of keeps the website small, which I totally agree with. I hate waiting for websites to load.
Yeah.
But I was curious, like when you have images,
Mhm.
so I know I've done a little bit of film before. It doesn't auto downsample if you put a big image there. I wonder if there's a way to do it like where you can have a small like image load, but then if you want to look at the full image, if you open a separate window, if it will go to a different file or if it will automatically look at the full image or not. I don't know if there's a way to do that.
So there's a couple different ways that you can shrink image sizes. The easiest like judo solution here is to if you have a build pipeline for your site, if like you save and before you deploy, then it like goes through and like minifies a bunch of stuff and that sort of thing.
Yep.
You can use image processing tools like command line image processing tools just to resize images. So this trains image is at least 4K or something like that.
Big.
But I shrink it down to 1920 by 1080 because I don't think anybody's going to be looking at it on a screen that's bigger than that. So that happens during the build process. It's possible to do progressive image loading, which means that the image, like the overall image size, is slightly larger than it would normally be. But because it's progressive, what that means is that it will create a small version of the image and sort of like embed that within the image so that when you load the image up on the page, it'll first load the small low resolution image and just like stretch it to fill it. And then as it continues downloading the image, it'll sort of like fill in the image right there. So that is another way to do it. As for actually clicking the image and having it go to a full-size image, that gets a little more tricky. I would say that like in that case, a better UI would be the right
you'd have
thing.
to use kind of a separate server-side thing where it would link to a different image than the one.
Yeah. So for the image tag, you would link to the small image, and then like if you right-clicked it, or maybe there was a button that was like view full-size image, and that's probably the way to do it. These images that I use are all from a site called Unsplash, which is like they have like 4K, really really nice images, all that stuff. And they serve all of those, and they're like at sort of good resolution. But if you want to download the full version, you have to like click the explicit download at full resolution button. So maybe a little bit of UI is the solution there. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. More questions?
I was curious as to if I could get a business.
Yeah,
card.
absolutely.
I don't currently have any questions, but if one pops up, I would
Totally.
appreciate it.
And definitely, if you have questions, ask him too.
Yeah, right.
He might be able to help. I don't know.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a question, man?
Yeah, I need a business
Oh,
card.
yeah, totally. Absolutely. Here you go, man.
Do you take like internships?
So I'm currently hiring an iOS developer for a project. I don't know if it's like internship level, right? It's also like the first iOS developer that I've hired, and it's like a contract basis. I will probably have need for interns in the future, but it's not like a full-time thing at all. It's like hey, I have a project. You want to work on this for 20 hours or something like that, and I can pay you this rate. But yeah, I mean, shoot me an email, and it's good to always like have the list of everybody that's in there. So
Okay.
yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely, man.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, how do we stop this?
You find the red button.
The red
Yeah,
button.
yeah.